The airport was bustling, the low hum of conversations and footsteps echoing against the polished floors. It was another ordinary day in a place where millions of travelers passed through without giving much thought to the people around them. Among the crowd, a little girl lay motionless on a bench, her body small and fragile against the harsh artificial lighting above. Her clothes were worn and faded, the kind that had seen too many seasons. She didn't move, not even when a man brushed past her, his suitcase rolling softly against the floor. The scene went unnoticed by most, as they were too focused on their own lives, but something felt off. A security guard noticed her then, pausing as he glanced her way, his eyes narrowing with a sense of unease. He had seen many things in his years at the airport, but this was different. The girl wasn't asleep. She wasn't resting. She was still. The guard's gut told him something wasn't right, but still, he hesitated. He was about to step forward when a soft voice broke through the air, sharp and clear. "Stop! Don't touch her!" The voice came from behind him. It was a woman, mid-30s, dressed in a suit, her heels clicking as she rushed to the girl's side. The security guard turned to her, his brow furrowing. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "She's not just sleeping. Something is wrong. You need to call an ambulance. Now," the woman insisted, kneeling beside the girl. Her voice was firm, her hands gently touching the girl's forehead. The girl was cold, too cold. The air around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The security guard pulled out his radio, speaking into it quickly. "We need medical assistance near gate 22. A young girl, possibly unconscious." As the woman checked the girl's pulse, her face remained calm, though her eyes were full of concern. The girl's shallow breathing was barely noticeable, but it was there, a faint sign of life. "She's barely holding on," the woman whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The airport seemed to freeze around them. No one moved, no one made a sound. It was as if time had stopped. People passing by slowed their steps, watching as the situation unfolded. And then, as if summoned by the quiet tension, a figure appeared in the distance. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, his presence commanding. It was the billionaire who owned the airport. His footsteps were purposeful, and his eyes locked onto the scene ahead. He had seen this little girl before, though he didn't know her name. He had seen her sitting there, all alone, earlier that morning. But now, seeing her like this, his heart clenched. He approached quickly, his gaze flicking from the woman to the girl. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low, yet laced with urgency. The woman glanced up at him. "She needs help. She's been here for hours, and I'm afraid she's been neglected. We need an ambulance." The billionaire knelt down, his eyes softening as he looked at the girl's pale face. "Who is she?" he asked, his voice a whisper now, as if he didn't want to disturb the fragile moment. The woman shook her head. "I don't know. I've never seen her before, but I know she needs help." The billionaire stood up slowly, his face hardening. "Get her to the hospital. Now. I want to know everything about her." He turned to the security guard. "Make sure she gets there safely." The woman stood as well, taking a step back as the guards arrived with a stretcher. The scene felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But it wasn't a movie, it was real. And for the first time in a long while, the billionaire felt something stirring inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. A sense of responsibility, a sense of urgency. The girl, motionless just moments ago, was now being whisked away to safety. But the billionaire couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. As the stretcher rolled away, he stood there, staring at the empty bench where the girl had lain. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but he knew one thing for certain: this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The girl was rushed to the hospital. The billionaire followed closely behind, his mind racing with questions. The entire scene replayed in his head, each detail standing out like a flashing light. He couldn't help but wonder who this girl was. Why was she so alone? How could someone let a child reach such a state? The hospital doors swung open as they arrived, and a flurry of medical staff rushed toward them. The girl, still unconscious, was swiftly transferred to a hospital bed, surrounded by machines beeping in rhythm with her pulse. The billionaire stood at the foot of the bed, watching as doctors and nurses worked around her. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was connected to her somehow, though he had no idea why. His mind raced through the possibilities. His heart, which had always been so detached from the world around him, was inexplicably moved. He thought back to earlier in the day, when he had seen her sitting alone in the airport terminal. She had been a stranger then, just another faceless individual passing through the crowded space. But now, seeing her like this helpless, vulnerable, he felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in years. A quiet voice inside him demanded answers, and he wasn't about to back down until he got them. "Who is she?" he asked, his voice low as he turned to one of the doctors. The doctor, a middle-aged man with glasses, looked up from the girl's chart. "We don't know yet," he said. "She was brought in by airport security. No identification, no family, no one with her." The billionaire felt a sharp pang in his chest. How could a child end up alone like this? He had everything, yet this girl had nothing. The contrast hit him harder than he expected. The doctor continued. "She's malnourished and severely dehydrated. We've started IV fluids, but it will take time. Right now, we're more concerned about her mental state. She's been through something, but we don't know what." The billionaire nodded absently, his eyes still on the girl. "Keep me updated," he said. "I want to know the moment she wakes up." The doctor nodded, sensing the urgency in the billionaire's tone. He was used to dealing with high-profile clients, but something about this felt different. The billionaire's gaze remained fixed on the girl. The sound of the heart monitor ticking steadily seemed to echo in his mind, reminding him of the time that had passed since she first caught his attention. As the minutes stretched into hours, he couldn't stop thinking about her. What had happened to her? Who was responsible? He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. "Find out everything you can about the girl who was brought in from the airport," he ordered. "I need her background, her family, anything." His assistant's voice crackled over the phone. "I'll get started right away." The billionaire hung up and glanced back at the girl. She still hadn't moved. A part of him wanted to walk away, to leave it all behind. But something he couldn't explain kept him rooted to the spot. The door to the room opened, and a nurse stepped in, interrupting his thoughts. "Sir," she said, looking at him with a slightly confused expression, "we've just received word from the police. They're asking about the girl." The billionaire's heart skipped a beat. "The police?" he repeated. "What do they want?" "They want to know if you recognize her. Apparently, there's been a missing person report filed." The billionaire's stomach churned. A missing person? How could this be? He thought back again, trying to place the girl in his mind. He had seen her before, but it felt like a distant memory, a brief interaction that hadn't registered at the time. And now, she was here, unconscious and alone. "I need to speak with them," the billionaire said, standing up abruptly. The nurse nodded and quickly left the room, returning moments later with a police officer. The officer was tall and imposing, his face set in a serious expression. "Mr. Pierce?" the officer asked, extending a hand. "Detective Harris, I'm here to ask you about the girl." The billionaire shook the detective's hand, his mind still racing. "I don't know anything about her," he said, his voice tight. "She was brought in from the airport. No one knew who she was. She doesn't have any identification, no family, nothing." Detective Harris nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "We've been looking for her. She was reported missing just a few days ago. Her name is Anna." The billionaire's breath caught in his throat. Anna. He had never known her name, but somehow it felt familiar, as if it had been waiting to be discovered. "What happened to her?" the billionaire asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know yet," the detective said, his tone softening slightly. "But we're doing everything we can to find out. We'll keep you updated, Mr. Pierce." The detective left the room, and the billionaire stood there, his mind reeling. He now knew her name, Anna, and suddenly, everything felt more urgent. He couldn't just walk away now. He had to know the truth. He had to know who she was and why she had ended up here, alone and forgotten. The next few hours felt like an eternity for the billionaire. He sat in the sterile waiting room of the hospital, a cold cup of coffee untouched beside him. His mind refused to settle, replaying the events over and over in his head. He had seen her lying on the airport bench, helpless and alone. He had seen her lifeless form carried into the emergency room, and it had stirred something in him. A part of him, a part he had buried for years, wanted to help her, to protect her. But now, as he waited for any news about her, the magnitude of what he was about to uncover began to weigh on him. He had no idea why this girl, this Anna, had suddenly entered his life with such force. He barely knew her, yet something about her struck him deeply, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow connected to her. The waiting room was almost silent, except for the occasional shuffle of footsteps. Outside the large windows, the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden glow across the city. It was a peaceful sight, but it only made the tension inside him grow. A sharp beep from his phone broke the silence. It was a message from his assistant. Asterisk, we've found something. She's been missing for 3 days. Her mother reported it to the police. There's more. Her father is, you, asterisk. The words on the screen seemed to freeze in place as his mind raced to process them. His heart skipped a beat. Her father was him? He couldn't believe it. This couldn't be possible. How had he not known? How had he not been informed that he had a daughter? The news hit him like a punch to the gut. He had spent years building an empire, focusing on his career, his wealth, and his status. But he had neglected someone more important than any business deal or investment, his own child. A flood of emotions rushed through him: guilt, confusion, anger at himself for not knowing, and a deep sense of responsibility that he had never felt before. He quickly dialed his assistant. I need everything on this girl. Now, he demanded, his voice tight. Her name is Anna. Her mother, her father. What do we know about them? His assistant's voice came through, calm but urgent. I'll gather the information and get back to you immediately. But from what we've found, Anna's mother has been in and out of hospitals for some time. We're trying to locate her, but her whereabouts are unclear. As for Anna's father, we're still looking into that. The billionaire ended the call and stood up, pacing in the small space. How could he have missed this? The realization that he had a daughter who had been alone, in pain, and who had somehow ended up at the airport, struck him hard. He felt a weight on his chest, a burden that had been there all along but had remained hidden beneath his successes and distractions. What kind of father was he to have let this happen? He looked around the room, his mind reeling, his thoughts spiraling. He needed answers, and he needed them now. The door to the waiting room opened, and the doctor entered. The billionaire immediately turned toward him, his pulse quickening. How is she? He asked, his voice barely steady. The doctor nodded solemnly, his expression serious. She's stable for now. We've managed to rehydrate her, and she's starting to show some signs of improvement, but she's still unconscious. We're not sure how long it will take for her to fully recover, but we're hopeful. The billionaire exhaled a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He felt a small sense of relief wash over him, but it didn't last. His mind was still racing with questions. What happened to her? How did she end up in such a condition? The doctor hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. We don't have all the details yet, but there are signs of neglect. She's been through a lot. She's malnourished, dehydrated, and emotionally distressed. There are also indications that she's been exposed to trauma. It's clear she's been through something very difficult. The billionaire felt his stomach tighten. Trauma? What kind of life had Anna lived? Who had done this to her? He clenched his fists, fighting back the anger and frustration that threatened to overwhelm him. He couldn't understand how this had happened, how his daughter had ended up in such a state. But he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to let it continue. He was going to find out everything about her, everything about what had happened to her, and he was going to fix it. As the doctor turned to leave, the billionaire stood still, his thoughts swirling. He couldn't believe what he had just learned. Anna, his daughter, had been missing for days, and now she was in a hospital bed fighting for her life. He had failed her before, but he wasn't going to fail her now. He would do whatever it took to make things right. He just needed to know the truth. The billionaire stood at the window of his office, staring out at the sprawling city below, but his mind was far from the view. His thoughts were consumed by Anna, the girl who had somehow become the center of his world. Despite how little he knew about her, his phone rang, snapping him out of his trance. He picked it up, his heart pounding. It was his assistant. Sir, we have new information about Anna. The voice on the other end said, "It's urgent. You need to hear this." The billionaire's chest tightened. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. "Anna's mother. She's alive. We've tracked her down. She's in a hospital in another state. She's been struggling with severe health issues for the past few years. There's more, though. We believe she's been trying to reach Anna, but we think someone's been blocking her attempts. We think she might have been kept from Anna for some time." The billionaire felt the ground shift beneath him. Anna's mother was alive? That was the first piece of the puzzle. The question was, why had he never known about her? Why hadn't he known about Anna, his daughter, until now? His mind was racing, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "Find out everything about Anna's mother. Get me in contact with her right now," he ordered, his voice firm with authority. "We can't waste any more time." He hung up and stood still, trying to process what he had just learned. A part of him was relieved that Anna's mother was alive, but another part of him felt a deep, gnawing sense of guilt. How had he not known about his daughter all these years? How had he missed all the signs? The door to his office opened, and his lawyer stepped in, holding a folder in his hands. "I have the legal documents you requested," the lawyer said, his voice low. "We've started the process to officially locate Anna's biological mother, but we've run into some complications." The billionaire turned to face him, his eyes intense. "What kind of complications?" "There are allegations of kidnapping and fraud. It seems someone has been keeping Anna from her mother for a long time. We're looking into it, but it's going to take time." The billionaire's fists clenched. "Kidnapping?" he repeated, his voice cold. "Who would do such a thing? And why? We're not sure yet, but it looks like the woman who's been blocking Anna's mother is connected to some powerful people. We're digging deeper into this." The billionaire stood up, his face hardening. "I don't care who's involved. I want answers. Get me everything you can on this." "Of course, sir. We'll move quickly." The lawyer left, and the billionaire was left alone with his thoughts. The walls of his office felt like they were closing in on him. His mind was consumed with the idea of the girl lying in the hospital bed, a girl he barely knew but who, in some strange way, felt like his own. He had to find her mother. He had to find the truth. He couldn't allow this to continue. The next day, he flew out to the hospital where Anna's mother was being treated. The flight was long, but his mind was too occupied to care about the hours passing. When he arrived, he was met by a nurse who led him to a small room at the end of the hallway. The woman lying in the bed was frail, her face gaunt and pale, but her eyes were filled with emotion. The billionaire stood at the door, unsure of what to say. He had no idea what to expect from this meeting, but he had to do it. "Mrs. Lewis?" he said, his voice soft. The woman's eyes fluttered open. She stared at him, confusion in her gaze. "Who are you?" she asked weakly. I'm here to talk about your daughter," he said carefully. "Anna. I'm her father." The woman's eyes widened, and tears filled them. "You're her father?" Her voice cracked, and she reached out toward him, but she was too weak to move. "I've been trying to find her. For so long," she whispered. The billionaire stepped closer, his heart heavy. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm here to help. I'm going to find her, and we're going to make sure she's safe." He took a seat beside her, his mind racing with the enormity of everything that was happening. He had never expected his life to take such a turn. He had never imagined that one day he would be sitting in a hospital room, talking to the mother of a daughter he had never known. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for helping her." The billionaire nodded, his resolve hardening. "I won't stop until I've made things right," he promised. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was finally doing something that mattered. He had a purpose, and that purpose was Anna. The billionaire stood by the window of his penthouse, looking out over the city that seemed so distant, so disconnected from the turmoil unfolding inside him. He had just left the hospital, where Anna's mother, Mrs. Lewis, had told him the story that had been hidden for so long. Anna's life had been filled with darkness and neglect, but now, finally, the pieces were starting to fall into place. His mind was heavy with thoughts of his daughter and the mystery surrounding her. What had happened to Anna? Who had kept her from her mother? And why had he, a father who should have been there, been completely unaware? He couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed her, failed his own daughter. He had spent so many years building an empire, thinking only about his success, his legacy, and yet he had missed the most important thing, his family. He turned away from the window as his phone buzzed on the desk. It was his lawyer. He quickly picked it up. "What do you have for me?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. "Sir," the lawyer's voice crackled, "we've traced the woman who has been keeping Anna from her mother. We believe she's been operating under the radar for years, and it looks like she has connections to powerful people." The billionaire's heart raced. Powerful people? He wasn't used to hearing this kind of thing. He was the one who had the power. "What kind of connections?" he demanded. "We're still digging, but we've found evidence that she's been involved in some shady dealings. It looks like she's been using Anna as leverage for something possibly financial. We don't have all the details yet, but we're working on it." The billionaire's fists clenched. He could feel the weight of his responsibility bearing down on him. Someone had been using his daughter, his blood. He didn't know who was behind it, but he was determined to find out. "Get me everything you can on her, and fast. I want to know who she is, who she's been working with, and why they've been keeping Anna from her mother," he ordered. "I'll get on it right away, sir," the lawyer replied, and the billionaire hung up. His thoughts were spinning. Anna had been through so much, more than any child should ever have to endure, and he had been blind to it all. But not anymore. He was going to find her. He was going to make things right. The next day, the billionaire made his way to the police station, where the investigation into Anna's disappearance was still underway. He had made calls to the authorities, pushing for answers, and now he was determined to be part of the solution. He walked into the dimly lit room where Detective Harris was reviewing files. The detective looked up as the billionaire entered, his face grim. "Mr. Pierce," he said, standing up and offering a handshake. "I've gathered all the information we have on Anna's case. It's not much, but it's a start." The billionaire shook his hand and sat down across from him. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice firm. "What do we know about the people who've been involved?" "We've uncovered a few leads," Detective Harris began, flipping through a stack of papers. "Anna's mother, as you know, has been trying to get to her for years. But there's someone powerful who has been blocking her. We believe this person has been using Anna for leverage, and we suspect there's more to the story. We've also found evidence that Anna has been moved around frequently, never staying in one place for long. Someone has been controlling her, keeping her away from her mother." The billionaire felt a surge of anger and frustration. Who could do such a thing to a child? "Have you found any information on this person?" he asked, leaning forward. "Not yet, but we're working on it. We've identified a few possible suspects, but we don't have enough to make an arrest." The billionaire nodded, his jaw tightening. "Keep me updated," he said, standing up, "and let me know the moment you find anything that connects these people to Anna." As he walked out of the station, his mind was already racing. He couldn't just wait for the police to find the answers. He needed to act. He needed to take control. He couldn't let anyone else control his daughter's fate. He got into his car and made a call to his private investigator, instructing him to follow any lead that could uncover the truth about Anna's disappearance. It wasn't enough to wait for the authorities. He needed to know everything, and he needed to know now. The investigator assured him that he would get to work immediately, and the billionaire hung up, feeling a sense of urgency building inside him. There was no time to waste. His daughter needed him, and he was going to find her no matter what it took. He drove through the city, his thoughts consumed with Anna. What kind of life had she lived? How had she ended up in this situation? He had so many questions, but for now, the most important thing was to find her. As he turned the corner toward his office, his phone buzzed again. It was his lawyer. "Mr. Pierce, we have a break in the case," the lawyer said. "We've identified the person who's been keeping Anna from her mother. I think you're going to want to hear this." The billionaire's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the answers he had been searching for. "What do you know?" he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. The billionaire felt his pulse quicken as he listened to his lawyer's voice over the phone. "Mr. Pierce, we've found the person who's been keeping Anna from her mother," the lawyer said. "Her name is Margaret Reynolds. She's been living under the radar for years, and she's connected to some very powerful people. The words sent a chill down the billionaire's spine. Margaret Reynolds. He had never heard of her, but it didn't matter. He needed answers, and he needed them now. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice urgent. "We believe she's staying in a small, isolated house in the woods. We've traced her location, but she's been hiding, making it difficult to reach her. We don't know exactly what she's up to, but we know she's been heavily involved in Anna's life, controlling where she goes, who she sees." The billionaire stood still, trying to absorb the information. Margaret Reynolds had been keeping Anna away from her mother, keeping her hidden for reasons he still didn't understand. He clenched his fists, a surge of anger rising in his chest. "I want to meet her. I want to know why she's been doing this," he said, his voice cold with determination. "I'll get the details and set up the meeting," his lawyer replied. "But be prepared. This may not be an easy conversation." The billionaire hung up the phone and stared out the window of his office. His mind was consumed with thoughts of Anna. What had she been through all these years? How had someone been able to control her life so completely? The thought of her in that situation, suffering in silence, made him sick to his stomach. He knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to find her, and he had to put an end to whatever this woman, Margaret Reynolds, had been doing. That evening, he set out for the location his lawyer had given him. The drive was long, taking him through winding roads and dense forest. The sun had long since set, and the darkness seemed to close in around him. His mind was racing, each thought more urgent than the last. As he neared the location, he could feel the tension building in his chest. This was it. The moment of truth. He pulled up to a small, run-down house tucked away in the woods. The windows were dark, the door locked tight. No lights, no signs of life. It was eerily quiet. He stepped out of the car, his footsteps crunching on the gravel as he made his way to the door. He knocked sharply, his fist pounding against the old wood. There was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. He reached for the handle and turned it, finding it unlocked. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit room inside. The air was stale, heavy with dust and disuse. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing in the empty house. There was a rustling sound from the back room, followed by a slow, deliberate footstep. The billionaire tensed, his instincts telling him to be cautious. Then, from the shadows, a woman appeared. She was tall, with sharp features and dark, calculating eyes. "You must be Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice cold and measured. "I've been expecting you." He stared at her, his heart pounding. This was Margaret Reynolds, the woman who had kept his daughter hidden, kept her from him for all these years. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the rising anger inside him. Margaret didn't flinch. She simply looked at him with a cold smile, her arms crossed. "Who?" she asked, feigning innocence. "Don't play games with me," the billionaire snapped. "I know you've been hiding Anna from her mother. I want to know why." Margaret's smile faded, her expression hardening. She took a step forward, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "You have no idea what you're getting into," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This isn't just about Anna, it's about something much bigger." The billionaire took a step toward her, his face inches from hers. "I don't care about your games. I care about my daughter. Tell me what's going on." Margaret let out a dry laugh. "You think you can just waltz in here and fix everything? You have no idea what you're dealing with. People like me don't just let go of control, not without a fight." The billionaire's eyes narrowed. "I don't care who you're working with," he said, his voice cold. "This ends now. I want answers, and I want Anna." Margaret looked at him for a long moment, her gaze calculating. "You're not going to get her that easily," she said. "But you'll learn soon enough what happens when you try to take something from me." She turned her back on him, walking toward the back room. "Come back tomorrow," she called over her shoulder. "Maybe then you'll understand." The billionaire stood frozen, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't going to be easy. He wasn't going to walk away with answers today. But he would find them. He would find Anna. And he would stop Margaret Reynolds, no matter what it took. The next day, the billionaire stood outside the isolated house, the air heavy with the tension of what he had learned the previous evening. He had spent hours replaying Margaret Reynolds' cold words in his mind, the threat she had made, and the certainty that she was hiding more than he could even imagine. He had expected resistance, but this was something far darker than he had anticipated. He had hoped to walk into that house and walk out with answers, but he had come away with only more questions. Margaret was not just a woman standing in his way. She was part of something much larger, something more dangerous. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but the walls were closing in fast, and he had no time to waste. The lawyer had sent him some updated information that morning. Margaret was a shadow. Every trace of her existence seemed to have been wiped clean. It was almost as if she had been living in the dark, off the grid for years, and now she was in the way of him finding his daughter. He needed to press harder. The car ride felt like an eternity as he made his way back to the house, his mind racing with strategies. This time, he couldn't afford to show weakness. He had to be sharp, direct. He pulled up to the house, the windows still dark, the gravel still untouched. The air was unnervingly quiet. Stepping out of the car, the billionaire's thoughts sharpened. This time, he was going to get the answers. He knocked again, more forcefully than before. The seconds stretched on, the silence thick and suffocating, before the door finally creaked open. Margaret stood there, her expression unreadable. "I told you to come back tomorrow," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "but you're not getting what you think you are." He didn't flinch, his gaze unyielding. "You've been hiding my daughter from me, keeping her from her mother. You've been using her for your own gain. I want answers, Margaret, now." Margaret let out a small laugh, cold and empty. "You think you're in control here? You have no idea what you're up against." She stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. "Come in, then. I'm sure you'll learn everything you need to know." He stepped inside, his senses on high alert. The house was as cold and barren as he remembered, a place of isolation and secrets. Margaret led him to a small, dimly lit room in the back of the house. The walls were covered with papers, maps, and files, everything connected to Anna. His heart sank as he took it all in. It was clear now that Margaret had been orchestrating everything, controlling every move Anna had made. "This is where it all begins," Margaret said, her voice colder than ever. "You think you can just waltz in and undo everything I've built? You're nothing but a pawn in this game. You don't get to control me, and you don't get to control my daughter," the billionaire said, his voice steady but filled with fury. "I don't care what game you think you're playing. I'm taking Anna back, and I'll make sure you face the consequences of everything you've done." Margaret's eyes flashed with something dark. She moved closer, her gaze never leaving his. "You don't know who you're dealing with," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I'm not just going to let you take her. If you think you can simply walk in here, take your daughter, and walk out without consequences, you're sadly mistaken." The billionaire stood his ground, his anger building with every word she spoke. "I've already told you. This ends now." He reached for his phone and called his lawyer, quickly giving him the details about Margaret's involvement and her connection to Anna. "I want her arrested. I want everything about her exposed," he said. "Find out who she's working with. Now." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You're making a huge mistake," she warned, stepping back. "You can't undo what's been done. The people I'm connected to, they don't play by your rules, and neither do I," the billionaire replied coldly. "You've underestimated me, Margaret. That's your mistake." He hung up the phone and looked back at her. "I'm taking Anna back, and nothing you do will stop me." For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, each of them sizing the other up. Then, Margaret turned away, walking toward the door. "You think you've won? Fine, but I'll make sure you regret it," she said over her shoulder. "You have no idea who you're really dealing with." The billionaire didn't flinch. He knew the road ahead was going to be difficult. Margaret was more dangerous than he had realized, but he was determined to stop her. He wasn't going to let anyone stand in the way of him getting his daughter back. As he walked out of the house, he knew that this was just the beginning. He wasn't going to stop until he had uncovered everything, and he was going to make sure that Margaret and anyone else involved would pay for what they had done. He was done playing by their rules. Now, it was his turn to take control. The billionaire sat in his office, staring out at the skyline, his mind heavy with everything that had transpired in the last few days. He had learned more than he ever expected to know about the woman who had kept his daughter hidden, and now it was time to confront the truth. His lawyer had gathered more evidence, and the truth about Margaret Reynolds was darker than he had ever imagined. She wasn't just a woman trying to control Anna for her own gain. She was part of a much larger, more dangerous network. Margaret's connections ran deep, and it was clear that she was not going to let Anna go without a fight. But the billionaire had already made up his mind. He was going to take back his daughter, no matter the cost. The phone on his desk rang, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was his lawyer. "Sir, we've made progress," the lawyer said. "We've traced some of Margaret's contacts. It seems she's been working with a group that has connections in high places. This is bigger than we thought." The billionaire's jaw tightened. He had known there was more to this than just Margaret, but hearing it confirmed only made him more determined. "Where are we now?" he asked, his voice steady. "We found out that one of her main contacts is a businessman named Charles Lawson. He's got ties to some very influential people. We believe he's the one who's been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Get me everything on Charles Lawson," the billionaire ordered. "I need to know everything about him, who he works with, where he's been, and what he's been involved in. I want him exposed. We're working on it, sir, but it's going to take some time. Lawson is a shadow. He's good at covering his tracks. I don't care how long it takes. I want answers, and I want them now," the billionaire snapped. He hung up the phone and stood up, his mind racing. He couldn't wait any longer. He had already wasted too much time. He grabbed his coat and headed out the door, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. His destination was clear. He was going to find Charles Lawson, and he was going to get the truth. The drive was long, and as he made his way to Lawson's business headquarters, the weight of the situation settled heavily on him. He had to be careful. Lawson wasn't just a businessman. He was a player in a game that was far more dangerous than anything the billionaire had ever experienced. When he arrived, he parked his car outside a sleek office building. It was well guarded, the kind of place where powerful people did their business, hidden from the world. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, his mind focused. He had no intention of leaving until he had what he came for. Inside, the lobby was quiet, the air thick with the scent of luxury. The receptionist looked up as he approached, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cold. "I'm here to see Charles Lawson," the billionaire said firmly. The receptionist hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone. She spoke into the receiver, and after a brief exchange, she hung up. "Mr. Lawson is expecting you," she said, gesturing toward the elevator. "He's on the top floor." The elevator ride was smooth, the ascent slow but steady. As the doors opened, the billionaire stepped out into a sleek, modern office space. There, behind a large desk, sat Charles Lawson. He was a man in his early 50s, well-dressed, with an air of authority about him. He stood as the billionaire entered, a smile creeping onto his face. "Mr. Pierce, I've been expecting you," Lawson said, his tone polite but laced with something more sinister. "I assume this is about Anna?" The billionaire didn't waste time. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Lawson's smile faded slightly, but he remained calm. "You think you can just walk in here and demand answers? It doesn't work that way, Mr. Pierce. I'm not leaving until I get the truth. Where is my daughter?" The tension in the room grew thick, and Lawson seemed to consider the situation for a moment. "You don't understand what you're up against. You're not dealing with just me. There are forces at play here that you have no idea about," Lawson said, his voice growing colder. "If you think you can just walk in and take Anna, you're wrong." The billionaire's eyes narrowed. "I don't care who you're working with. I'm taking my daughter back, and I'm going to make sure you and your associates pay for what you've done." Lawson laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about Anna. This is about power. People like me don't lose control easily." The billionaire stepped closer to the desk, his face hard. "I'm done with your games. You're going to tell me where she is, and you're going to do it now." Lawson's eyes darkened, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. "You want to know where she is?" Lawson said finally. "She's closer than you think, but getting to her won't be easy, and it will cost you more than you're willing to pay." The billionaire leaned in, his voice low. "I don't care what it costs. I'm taking her back. The tension in the room was palpable. Lawson studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. Then get ready, Mr. Pierce. You have no idea what you're getting into. With that, the billionaire turned and walked out, a new sense of resolve settling over him. The game had changed, and he wasn't going to stop until he had Anna back, no matter what it took. The billionaire sat in his car, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. The conversation with Charles Lawson had left him with more questions than answers, and the cold response from the businessman had only fueled his resolve to find Anna. His heart raced with the intensity of the situation. Lawson had given him a cryptic warning, a challenge that only made him more determined. It was clear now that he was not just dealing with a rogue individual. Lawson was part of something much larger, something far more dangerous. The truth about Anna's disappearance, about the forces at play behind her captivity, was just beginning to unfold. The more he learned, the more he realized how little he truly understood about the web of power and manipulation surrounding his daughter. The billionaire had never been one to back down from a fight, but this wasn't just about business or money. This was his daughter. The stakes were higher than anything he had ever faced. As he pulled up to the location Lawson had hinted at, a small, discreet building tucked away in an industrial area, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on his chest. The place was quiet, eerily so, with few people in sight. He parked the car and stepped out, his footsteps echoing in the empty street. He had no idea what he would find inside, but he was done waiting. He was done playing by anyone's rules but his own. As he approached the building, the door swung open before he could even knock. A man stepped out, tall and imposing, his eyes cold and calculating. "You must be Mr. and Pierce," the man said, his voice low and steady. The billionaire nodded. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice hard, unwavering. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he sized the billionaire up, his gaze piercing, as if calculating the best way to respond. Finally, he spoke. "Come in. I think you'll want to hear this for yourself." Reluctantly, the billionaire followed the man into the building. The interior was dark, sparse, and felt almost abandoned. The air smelled of dust and old wood, a stark contrast to the sleek, modern offices he was accustomed to. The man led him down a narrow hallway, stopping at a door near the end. Without saying another word, the man opened the door and motioned for the billionaire to enter. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with only a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room was a large table, scattered with papers, photographs, and what looked like surveillance footage. At the far end of the table, a tall figure stood, his back to the door, staring at a screen. The billionaire took a step forward, his mind racing. He didn't know what to expect, but the chill in the air told him that whatever he was about to hear would change everything. The man who had been standing turned around slowly. His face was familiar, but it took the billionaire a moment to place him. "I've been expecting you," the man said with a cold smile. "You've come to ask about your daughter. Who are you?" the billionaire asked, his voice sharp. "I'm someone who knows more about your daughter than you do," the man replied, his tone dismissive. "I know who's been keeping her from you. I know everything about the people who've been controlling her life. And I know how this game is going to end." The billionaire's heart pounded in his chest. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. The man's smile widened. "You think you're the first person to try and take back what's been stolen from you? You think you're the first to challenge us?" The billionaire took a step closer, his fists clenched. "I'm not like the others," he said coldly. "I will not stop until I have my daughter back." The man chuckled darkly. "You're making a mistake," he said. "This is bigger than you, bigger than your wealth, your power. This is about control, and you're not going to win." The billionaire didn't flinch. "I've already won," he said, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. "The moment I decided to take back what's mine, I won." The man's expression faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "You'll regret this," he warned. "We have eyes everywhere. You won't be able to hide from us." The billionaire stood his ground. "I don't need to hide. I need to find my daughter, and nothing you say or do will stop me." The man looked at him with a mixture of disdain and amusement. "We'll see about that," he said. "But for now, you'll stay out of our way." The billionaire knew then that this wasn't just a battle for Anna's freedom. This was a battle for everything he had built, everything he had ever believed in. The fight was far from over, and the true cost of winning was still unknown. But one thing was certain: he would not back down. Not now. Not ever. The billionaire stepped into the cold, dimly lit room, the weight of the conversation still hanging in the air. Lawson's cryptic warning echoed in his mind. Asterisk. This is bigger than you. Asterisk. As the door slammed behind him, the reality of the situation settled in. His plan to take back his daughter was no longer a simple task. It was a full-fledged war against forces far more powerful than he had anticipated. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his concentration. He pulled it out, eyes scanning the screen. It was his lawyer. Asterisk. We have the final piece. Asterisk. The message read. Asterisk. Charles Lawson is more connected than we thought. There's a hidden network behind him, and it's far-reaching. I suggest you prepare for what's coming next. Asterisk. The billionaire's pulse quickened. It wasn't just Lawson. It wasn't just Margaret Reynolds. This was something much bigger. He stared at the message for a moment longer before typing back. Asterisk. I'm not backing down. Find out everything you can on Lawson's connections. Now. Asterisk. He felt a sudden urge to act, to break free of the confines of the building he had just entered. But the lawyer's words kept ringing in his head. Asterisk. Prepare for what's coming next. Asterisk. He couldn't afford to be rash. He needed to think this through, even as time seemed to slip away. His daughter, Anna, was still out there, lost in the hands of people who saw her as nothing more than a pawn in their game. His mind flashed back to the cold, empty room he had walked through earlier, the files, the photographs, the carefully laid out plans. Lawson had orchestrated this. He was at the heart of everything. The billionaire took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. He couldn't let fear control him. Not now. He made his way out of the building, the darkness of the night wrapping around him like a shroud. His mind was a storm of conflicting emotions, anger, fear, guilt, but there was something else there too. Resolve. He would get his daughter back. He had no choice. The drive to his next destination was a blur. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, the city lights flashing by in a haze. He didn't know what he would find when he got there, but he was ready. He had to be. When he finally arrived at the location, a rundown warehouse on the edge of town, the silence that greeted him felt like a warning. No lights, no signs of life, just the faint hum of machinery in the distance. He stepped out of the car and surveyed the area. There was no one in sight, but the air felt thick with tension. Every instinct told him that something was waiting for him inside. His heart pounded in his chest as he approached the warehouse. The door was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open, stepping into the dark, cavernous space. The air was musty, the scent of rust and decay filling his nostrils. He could hear the faint sounds of movement in the shadows, and he knew he wasn't alone. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing off the walls. Silence answered him. Then, from the far corner of the warehouse, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that seemed to belong to a man who had seen too much. He looked at the billionaire with cold, calculating eyes. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is not your fight." The billionaire didn't flinch. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Where is my daughter?" The man laughed, a humorless sound that seemed to echo in the vast space around them. "You think you can just walk in and take her back? It's not that easy. You've crossed a line, Mr. Pierce. There's no going back now." The billionaire's anger flared. "I'm not leaving without her." "Then you'll regret it," the man said, stepping forward. "You're playing in a game you don't understand, and you'll be the one who loses." The billionaire's fists clenched, but he held his ground. "I don't care about your threats. I'll destroy everything you've built to get to her." "You don't get it," the man said, his voice colder now. "This isn't just about Anna. It's about power. The kind of power that doesn't let people like you walk away." The billionaire took a step forward, his eyes locked on the man's. "I'll make you regret ever crossing me," he said, his voice steady, filled with unshakable determination. The man paused, his gaze flicking from the billionaire to the darkness behind him. For a moment, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You don't understand," the man said again, softer this time. "There are forces at play here that you can't fight." "I don't care about your forces," the billionaire said. stepping closer. "I care about my daughter, and I'm taking her back, no matter what it takes." The man's face hardened, and for a moment, it seemed like he might back down. But then, his eyes narrowed. "You really think you can take her from us?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. "We'll see how far you get." The billionaire stood tall, his resolve unwavering. "I've already come this far, and I'm not stopping now." With that, the man stepped aside, revealing a door behind him. The billionaire didn't hesitate. He pushed past the man and walked through the door, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. The fight for Anna's freedom was far from over, and he was ready to do whatever it took to bring her home. "I will not fail her." Those words repeated in the billionaire's mind as he stepped deeper into the dim corridor behind the warehouse door. The air was thick with tension, the kind that pressed against his skin and made every breath feel heavier. A flickering light overhead revealed a long hallway, concrete walls lined with old pipes, the faint hum of machinery echoing through the space. He could feel that he was close, closer than he had been since the moment he found Anna motionless on that airport bench. His heart pounded in his chest, every step a mix of fear, urgency, and determination. He walked forward until he reached another door, this one metal and older than the rest. He pushed it open slowly, his breath catching in his throat at what he saw. A wall of screens filled the room, each showing different angles of the city, the airport, the hospital where Anna had been taken. They were watching everything. And then, in the center of the screen grid, he saw her. Anna. She was in a small room, sitting on a bed, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked frightened, but she was alive. A wave of relief washed over him, followed immediately by a surge of anger. How long had they been watching her like this? How long had she been trapped while powerful people played games with her life? A voice came from behind him, and he spun around sharply. It was Lawson. He had followed him without a sound. "She is safe," Lawson said, almost casually, as if talking about a business asset. For now. The billionaire's fists clenched at his sides. "I do not want to hear your excuses. I want to see my daughter," Lawson sighed, shaking his head as if the billionaire were a child refusing to understand a simple lesson. "You still think this is about your daughter. It is not. It never was. Anna is part of something much larger, something you cannot begin to understand. She is the key to leverage, to influence, to power. She is a child," the billionaire snapped, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "She is my daughter, not a pawn, not leverage, not a tool." Lawson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You are thinking like a father, but the people involved in this, they do not think like that. They think in terms of control, and as long as you keep pushing, you are painting a target on her back." The billionaire's jaw tightened. He stepped forward until he was inches from Lawson. "Then let them come after me. But they will never touch her again. I will make sure of that." Lawson tilted his head, studying him with a cold, detached curiosity. "You would go that far for her? A girl you barely know?" The billionaire did not hesitate. "Yes." Lawson paused. For the first time since their meeting, something flickered in his expression. Not fear, but recognition. As if he were seeing the billionaire clearly for the first time. "Very well," Lawson said at last. "But you should understand what your declaration means. If you take her back, you are declaring war, and wars have casualties." The billionaire said nothing. He did not need to. His silence was the answer. Lawson moved toward the screens again, tapping a button on the console. The image shifted, zooming closer on Anna's face. The billionaire felt his throat tighten. She looked exhausted, her small shoulders trembling just slightly, as if she were trying to hold herself together. "She is strong," Lawson said quietly. She had to be. Something inside the billionaire cracked. A mixture of rage, grief, and guilt tore through him. She had been strong because she had no choice. Because the adults who were supposed to protect her, him included, had failed her. "I am done talking," the billionaire said, his voice low and steady. "Take me to her." "Now." Lawson hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Fine. But once you walk through that door, there is no going back. Everything changes. Your life, her life, the lives of everyone involved. Open the door," the billionaire demanded. Lawson pressed a button, and another door at the far end of the room unlocked with a heavy click. The billionaire did not wait. He moved quickly, every muscle in his body tense with anticipation, fear, and hope. As he reached the door, he stopped for a moment, gathering himself. He could hear his heartbeat pounding like a drum in his ears. This was the moment, the one he had fought for, the one he had risked everything to reach. He pushed the door open, and there she was, Anna, sitting on the edge of a small bed, her legs dangling, her big eyes lifting to meet his. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to fall away, the noise, the danger, the darkness, all of it fading into the background. Her voice was small, fragile, but steady. "Are you here for me?" The billionaire's throat tightened, and he nodded, his voice breaking as he spoke. "Yes, I am here. And I am not leaving without you." For the first time in days, Anna breathed out, a tiny, shaky sigh of relief. Hope flickered in her eyes. And for the billionaire, that hope was everything. The billionaire stepped fully into the small room, closing the door gently behind him as if any sudden sound might shatter the fragile moment between him and the little girl sitting on the bed. Anna looked at him with wide, fearful eyes, her small hands gripping the edge of the thin blanket. The room was simple, a single lamp in the corner casting a soft, warm glow that seemed out of place in the cold building she had been kept in. He took a slow step toward her, careful not to rush, careful not to overwhelm her. She had already been through so much. "It is really you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought maybe I dreamed it." He knelt beside her, lowering himself to her level. "It is really me," he said, his voice gentle but sure. "I came for you, and I am here to take you somewhere safe, somewhere no one will ever hurt you or control you again." Anna looked down at her hands, her small fingers fidgeting nervously. "She said no one would come," she murmured. "She said people do not care about kids like me." The billionaire's heart clenched at the quiet pain in her words. "She was wrong," he said firmly. "You matter. You matter more than anything. And not just to me. There are people who care about you. Your mother cares about you. She has been trying to find you for a long time." Anna's head snapped up, her eyes filling with tears. "My mom? She is alive?" He nodded. "Yes, she is alive, and she has been looking for you every single day." A small, shaky breath escaped Anna's lips, the kind that comes from a heart that has carried too much weight for too long. She looked at him again, searching his face for truth, for safety, for something solid she could cling to. "Can you take me to her?" she asked softly. "I want to see her. I want to go home." "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I will take you to her. I promise." For the first time, something changed in Anna's expression, a flicker of trust, a spark of hope. She reached out, her tiny hand touching his. It was small, so small compared to his, but the moment felt immense. A quiet strength radiated from her, the kind that comes from surviving what no child ever should. He gently helped her off the bed. Her legs shook slightly as her feet touched the floor, and she leaned into him for support. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steadying her. "We have to walk out together," he said softly. "We have to be brave for a little longer." Anna nodded, her eyes determined now. She had already shown more bravery than many adults ever would. They walked toward the door, and when he opened it, the hallway stretched before them, dim, quiet, seeming longer than it had before. But this time, he was not walking it alone. As they stepped out, Lawson appeared at the far end of the hallway. His expression was unreadable, his gaze shifting between the billionaire and the girl standing beside him. "So you made your choice," Lawson said quietly. The billionaire tightened his hold on Anna, positioning himself slightly in front of her. "She is not a choice," he said, his voice steady. "She is my daughter, and I am taking her home." Lawson exhaled slowly, almost as if he had expected this. "You know this will bring consequences," he warned. "People will come after you, after her." "Then let them come," the billionaire replied. "I will protect her. That is my responsibility, not yours." Lawson studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then go," he said quietly, "but understand that nothing will ever be the same after today." The billionaire did not look back. He led Anna down the hallway, every step bringing them closer to freedom. When they reached the exit, the night air rushed over them, cool and fresh, like a blessing. Anna squeezed his hand. Is it really over? She whispered. Not yet, he said gently, but it will be soon, and the worst is behind you. I will make sure of that. Anna looked up at him, her eyes shining with trust, with hope, with something fragile but growing stronger with every breath she took. Thank you, she whispered, for coming for me. He felt something inside him shift, a part of him that had been frozen for years beginning to thaw. I will always come for you, he said softly, and he meant it, as he lifted her into the car and buckled her gently into the back seat. He knew with absolute certainty that everything in his life had changed. The world was watching. The people behind her disappearance would not stay silent, but none of that mattered right now. They were together, and together, they would face whatever came next. As the car drove through the darkened streets, the billionaire's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of the journey, the endless hours spent searching, the countless obstacles, all seemed to culminate in this one moment. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Anna, sitting quietly in the back seat, her small face pressed against the window as the city lights blurred past. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself a moment of peace. His daughter was safe. After everything, after all the pain, the lies, the deception, he had brought her back. He could hear her soft breathing in the back seat, a sound that was both reassuring and humbling. This wasn't the end, though. It couldn't be. The people who had caused so much harm, the ones who had manipulated Anna's life, were still out there. The battle was far from over. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe in the possibility of peace. The car turned down a quiet road, the tall trees on either side casting long shadows. It wasn't far now. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and for a moment, he hesitated, but he knew who it was, his lawyer. We've tracked down some of Lawson's connections. The lawyer's voice came through the speaker. We're getting closer, but it's going to take time. This isn't over. There's more we need to uncover. People in high places are involved. They won't let go of this easily. The billionaire listened, his eyes narrowing with resolve. I don't care how long it takes, he said, his voice steady and unyielding. I will make sure she's protected. I won't stop until every last one of them is held accountable. We're on it, the lawyer replied. We'll be in touch soon. He hung up, his focus returning to the road ahead. Anna's soft voice broke through the quiet of the car. Are we going home? She asked, her words barely above a whisper. The billionaire glanced at her in the rearview mirror, meeting her gaze. Her eyes were full of uncertainty, but there was something else there now, too. Hope. Yes, he said softly. We're going home, to a place where you can finally feel safe, a place where no one can hurt you again. Anna's eyes softened, her small fingers curling into the fabric of the seat as if to ground herself in the reality of his words. For the first time since he had found her at the airport, she smiled. It was a small smile, fragile and uncertain, but it was a smile nonetheless. The car came to a stop outside a large, beautiful house on a quiet street. The lights were on, the warm glow spilling from the windows, and for the first time, the billionaire felt a sense of peace wash over him. This house would be her home, his home. He turned off the engine and opened the door, stepping out into the cool night air. Anna slowly followed, her small hand clutching his as they walked up to the door together. He unlocked it and led her inside. The house was spacious, but it felt like a refuge, a safe haven where they could begin anew. He turned on the lights, watching as Anna took in the warmth of the place. The softness of the furniture, the gentle glow of the lamps. It was everything she needed, everything she had been denied for so long. Do you like it? He asked, his voice soft. Anna nodded slowly, her eyes wide with wonder. It's nice, she said quietly. I've never had a place like this before. The billionaire felt his throat tighten at her words. It was the truth. She had never had a real home, a place where she was truly safe and loved. But now, that was changing. He was going to give her that. He was going to protect her from everything, from everyone who had ever tried to tear her apart. For the first time, Anna seemed to relax. She walked over to the couch, her tiny body curling up in the corner. The billionaire sat down beside her, his eyes on her as she looked up at him. I'm sorry I couldn't be there sooner, he said, his voice full of regret. Anna looked at him, her eyes soft but strong. It's okay, she whispered. You're here now. The billionaire exhaled, the weight of everything finally beginning to lift. Yes, he said quietly, I am, and I'm never going to leave you again. He reached out, gently brushing a lock of hair from her face, and for the first time, Anna's smile wasn't so fragile. It was real, a sign of the healing that had only just begun. The journey wasn't over. There would be more battles to fight, more people to confront, but tonight, they were together, and together, they would face whatever came next. No matter the cost, no matter the challenge, the billionaire knew one thing for sure. He would do whatever it took to keep his promise, to give Anna the life she deserved, and to never let her go. This captivating black story follows the emotional journey of a father fighting against powerful forces to bring his daughter back. After years of separation, the billionaire embarks on a relentless mission to rescue his daughter, Anna, from the grips of manipulation and control. As he uncovers shocking truths about the dark web of power that has kept her hidden, he faces moral dilemmas and threats that test his resolve. The story delves deep into themes of love, sacrifice, and redemption, highlighting the resilience of a father determined to protect his child at all costs. In the face of overwhelming opposition, the billionaire's quest to reunite with Anna is a stirring example of the lengths a parent will go to in the name of family. This gripping black story is not just about a fight for one child's safety, but a battle against the systems that seek to exploit and control. As the journey unfolds, the billionaire learns the true meaning of family and the strength found in unconditional love. This black story is a powerful testament to the courage that can emerge when one refuses to accept injustice. As they face danger and deception, the billionaire and Anna's journey takes unexpected turns, proving that the fight for what is right is worth every sacrifice. Don't miss out on this unforgettable black story that explores the bonds of family, the power of hope, and the resilience of the human spirit.